Welcome to the webinar to do with the Just Centres Commissioning Fund. This is going to be a short sort of whirlwind tour and an opportunity for you to get a sense of what's going on and some questions you probably have about the fund if you've already started thinking about a potential project. My name is Matt Paterson. I'm a professor of politics at Manchester University, and I'm the deputy director of the Just Centre, and along with several colleagues have been sort of leading the process of thinking about how to organise this commissioning fund, and then starting the process that we're going through now. So I'll try and run you through the process. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to give a quick overview now for the next 5 minutes of the fund and how it fits into the Just Centre's work. I'll show you briefly the FlexiGrant portal so that you've got a sense of what that looks like. Some of you may have looked through all these things already, but hopefully I'll pick out what seem to me the key things to think about. We'll have some time for Q&A. There's the Q&A function in the webinar to be able to put questions in the chat there, and we can use that to deal with questions, especially if there are people asking the similar question. We can group the responses to that. There were 154 people signed up for this webinar, so if everybody is here and everybody has a question, we won't be able to get through all of those questions clearly in the seminar as well, in the webinar as well. So having them written down in the Q&A will enable us to pick those up in other ways and let you know answers to questions, even if we don't manage to deal with all of them during the webinar itself. And then at the end, what we said we want to do, there may be people here who've got an idea for a project but don't necessarily have a team for it. There may be people outside academia with an idea for a project looking for academic partners. There are people, maybe people within academia looking for non-academic partners. There may be just other people looking for people with different skills or similar interests they want to join. So we'll have 20 odd minutes at the end of that, in the second half of the webinar, for people to be able to make those links. That may not be relevant to everybody, which is why we've got it at the end, so you can leave if that's not something you're looking for. We've organised those into breakout rooms around the 5 priority themes for the call, which I'll outline in a bit. And then we'll have 5 minutes as well for a wrap up if there's any remaining issues or questions. Okay, so just briefly on the Just Centre. The Just Centre is a ESRC and UKRI funded centre of about £8 million, an investment over 5 years. We started life early last year, and our focus is on sustainability transformations that are people-centred, joined up and socially just. So the just is both obviously signals the word justice as a central part of our concern, but it's also spells out joined up sustainability transformations. Sherilyn McGregor, who is the director of the centre, is also the queen of acronyms and came up with that great way of capturing what the centre does. And we're exploring existing initiatives adopted by communities, municipalities and businesses to pursue low carbon living, and also envisaging towards in the second half of the centre's life co-developing new initiatives with partners in communities and the policy world. We've got through a number of overarching research themes, thinking about the principles of justice, the underlying meanings of justice, thinking about democratic innovations, thinking about social and solidarity economies, thinking about social and built infrastructures, thinking about policy, governance and change, and across all of those, thinking about new ways of doing research, co-producing creative methods, and so on, to develop novel insights about pursuing sustainability and social justice at the same time. Signal those partly because the applications need to be able to speak to at least one of those themes. Our own work, this is not totally crucial for the applications to the commissioning fund, but for our own work, we're organised across 5 regions of Northern England: Merseyside, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, and North East of England, and West Cumbria. And then we've got essentially 5 partner universities in each of those regions. So Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, and Lancaster. but as you'll see, the applications to the commissioning fund don't necessarily need to be based in those regions, although they can be. Okay. So an overview, just there, a reminder that there's a Q&A function, just a button just at the top of your screen where you can start putting questions whenever you've got them. That's feel free to start putting those in. And Neve Hockey, who's coordinating this sort of technical side of the call, will be able to sort of filter those questions and help answer them in an efficient way once we get to that point in the proceedings. Okay, so the fund, we have an overall budget of 530,000. That's a slightly old number. That's because it was originally 500,000 in the application, but we get the sort of inflation drives that up. The individual awards can be between 25,000 and 62,500. That's the 100% FEC number. We will fund 80% FEC, as will normal UKRI grants. That's full economic costing. And so that would be 20,000 to 50,000 of what we will fund. There are some exceptions to that in terms of partner, non-academic partner costs. Some of those can be at 100% VC. The projects must be led by somebody at an institution eligible for UKRI funding. So non-academic partners usually can't apply directly. They need an academic partner at an academic institution to lead the funding in terms of the PI. The projects must also be focused on the UK, although if that's embedded in some sort of international collaboration or comparison, that's fine. They must involve some sort of co-production with partners. Now, some people understand co-production to mean a very specific type of relationship between researchers and community partners. I think we're using it in a loose way, some way in which the project is carried out in collaboration with a non-academic partner of some sort. It needs to make some claim about generating new evidence about what works or might work to accelerate low carbon living. That's in line with the broad Just Centre sort of goals. It needs to connect in some way to the Just Centre's wider research and impact programs. You need to have a look around our website and think about what we're doing and work out how you would connect. And then there's some sort of standard reporting progress requirements, which are driven by UKR requirements. So on the individual awards thing, we've had a few questions to the email, which some of you may have already, that there is a glitch, or there has been a glitch. We think we fixed it now, in terms of what two documents on the website said about the funding limits, and this 25,000 to 62,500 at 100% FEC is the correct number, if you have that question in your mind. The other glitch that I will say about there was in the main funding call, is there was a statement still in there which we thought we'd got rid of, but we hadn't, which said that project lead and project co-lead costs could not be included, but that's not true. They can be included. We had the explanation for that is that in our initial design of it, we wanted to exclude them because we thought that would take up quite a lot of the costs, but ESRC have said that's a requirement of the thing, that those PL costs can be included. We just apologies for not getting rid of this glitch. This is the first. None of us have run a grant application process before. So just to come back to that point about connecting to the Just Centre objectives. So it's worth thinking about what our overall goals are and how your project might fit into that. So the overall aims of our programme research are to investigate what works, when, where and for whom, and also what could work, right? You could have a project about something that sort of doesn't quite work, but it's designed to help think about how it could. To facilitate the development and implementation of joined up interventions for a just transition to low carbon living. Secondly, how, where and with whose participation can sustainability transformations be accelerated? And in particular for citizens in places that benefit least from dominant economic and political systems, hence our focus on the north of England. And then thirdly, what lessons for just sustainability transformations can governments, businesses and communities learn from place-based co-produced action research? So those are our sorts of goals, and we're hoping to commission funds projects in line with those sorts of overall goals. There's obviously a lot of different ways that could be carried out. We're particularly interested in encouraging projects focused on one of those 5 areas. They're partly essentially ones where we've looked around at the skills and expertise of the team in the Just Centre itself and the projects that we are going to be carrying, we've already started ourselves, of ones where we think these are interesting thematic areas that we're not actually directly working on or only indirectly working on at the moment. So we wanted to use the commissioning fund to make sure that we were funding work that covered these areas. So rural economies, biodiversity and nature, jobs and skills, race, ethnicity and justice, and storytelling, journalism. Somebody asked a question about whether it has to be storytelling and journalism. I think read that as an and or, but it doesn't have to be connected to the media, but thinking about narratives and stories in terms of how they generate transformative processes. And then we can welcome projects that either are in our core areas of those 5 regions or outside. Right? If you're in other parts of the UK, we would welcome that. And when we get to the evaluation, it'll become clear that we will want to be funding a breadth of projects across a diverse range of sort of geographies to help bring the insights from that range. So the submission and the evaluation. So those are some links here. All of these slides will be up on the website after the webinar, and of course the webinar itself will go up on as a video later on. So you'll be able to come back to these. All of these have got hyperlinks in. If this is the simplest way to get to them, there's a set of documents. There's the full call document, and then there's a set of policy documents that you would need to be aware of as you develop the application. It's a FlexiGrant is the portal that we're using to apply, and I'll show you that briefly in a second. We've also got a version of the form in PDF with all the questions, so that you can download that first, work out all of the bits that you have to produce, rather than simply go into FlexiGrant and not be exactly sure once you start filling things in exactly the process to follow. We've got FlexiGrant is the only way you can apply. We can't accept applications by any other route. Okay, those are sort of just a sense of the evaluation criteria. I think they're fairly obvious. I won't signal them all. The obvious ones are then, we'll be evaluating it according to the strength of fit with the Just Research agenda, that it fits in one of those 5 themes or has another, sort of thematic area that we judge interesting. Standard set of academic criteria in terms of originality and ambition and so on. We're quite interested in how well the project has been co-developed with your project partners, and then how you envisage engaging with one of the just thematic areas. So that's we can take questions on those if you want, but I think they're fairly straightforward. What we're going to do to evaluate it is that we will. Oh, there is one bit there missing. Sorry, I didn't check that beforehand. So we will Just Centre members. Each application will get scored according to those criteria by Just Centre members, and then ones that score highly, we will discuss at a management board for the fund, which we're putting together at the moment. We have so it'll be 3 or 4 members of the Just team, and then 3 members from essentially an academic advisory board, which we call our Critical Friends group. And that evaluation process will happen September, October. And it's worth noting that we're going to consider the scores and the reports by the Just team members, but the board will also make decisions on a sort of portfolio. We don't want, to fund 15 superb applications all happen to be about housing retrofit or some other topic, so that we've got a diversity of funded projects according to those priority themes. We would like to favour ECRs where possible, We'd also want sort of the broader EDI principles underpinning justice as a centre, and actually a range of geographical areas as well. So we've got some diversity there. So it won't be just that the most highly scored projects get funded. It will also be we'll also be looking at that in the round. Those are the deadlines that's up on the website. I think that's fairly straightforward. So the 15th of September for you is the key one, with an idea that projects will be starting by April of 2027. Okay, so I'll just show you a little bit. That's the sort of main page, the FlexiGrant portal. Hopefully this works and you can see that. This is the page I see when I've created a fictitious application. There will be a stage you will see the first time you go in, which is one before that, where you have to create the login to be able to start an application and register for an account. But then when you get in there, you get the password. I've read the above information, and then you'll see a main page where you'll see the one at the top. So the EDI form is separate from the others. The EDI form is optional for you to submit, I think, but it helps us. It's mostly for us to be able to evaluate ourselves about how well we're making those decisions in EDI terms, or what the EDI outcomes of the decisions we make are, and help us reflect on that. And then you've got the key elements of there, each of which they have their own section. And yeah, just to show you one of these. Oh no, that's not a very good one. That doesn't have anything for you to do. Sorry. Yeah, so then you've got standard boxes to be filling in and so on. So I think hopefully it's a fairly straightforward process, that, and hopefully fairly easy now. Okay, so back to here. I think we're nearly there. Right. So that's the whirlwind tour. Hopefully reasonably clear, but probably almost certainly has generated some questions. So now we've got a bit of time for Q&A, and you can I think you should be able to you should be able to either put things in the chat to the webinar, and I'm not sure, because Neve will know better than me, whether you can actually also then put your hand up and ask a question. So Neve, if you maybe want to take over just briefly in terms of the running the Q&A.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So yeah, thanks everyone. We've got a lot of questions come through already, so we will try and get through as many as possible. So just to kick off with, this kind of two questions that are quite similar. So someone has said, can you submit more than one proposal, and can projects be connected to more than one theme?
I mean, I would say on both of those, on the first one of those, I mean, we haven't said you can't. So, I mean, I would suspect that we would be unlikely to fund two by the same person, given the portfolio approach that I just sketched out. But if you've got two ideas, I don't see why not. It's obviously more work to put those things together over the summer, but I don't see any particular reason why you can't apply with two different project ideas. And absolutely, you can connect to two themes. What if you look at the main call document, it's something along the lines of we would be wanting to get you connected with the working group we have for each theme. So it would be a sort of not just a signaling, right? Okay, I'm doing something that's about democratic innovation. It would also be, well, okay, the members of that working group on democratic innovation would be interested in you working with them, right? Attending their meetings and maybe working out how it's connecting to the work that they're doing. So it's a sort of active integration rather than just sort of oh, well, I align with this and that theme. So if you are signaling, right, oh, I do all of the themes, then that's a bit, that would imply quite a lot more. So being a little bit targeted probably makes most sense, given that what we're hoping to get to get, we're hoping that these projects will be integrated into the Just Centre's work rather than just standalone things that we fund and then leave entirely separate. So it's worth thinking about how you would want to work with the people involved in those themes.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. So we've got some other questions about higher education partners. So someone has asked, can the proposed project have more than one non-academic partner, or does it need to be just one? And then someone has also asked, would you prefer to just have one?
I think the logic of the project is the deciding factor in that, in the sense that you could easily imagine where you had a project where you had somebody who was a local government policy person, and somebody who was sort of running a community hub as a community activist, and it would make most sense to have both of those, right? So I don't think there's a rule. There is obviously cost implications, right? You can apply for partner costs in terms of time, and the more people you involve, the more if they all need some sort of funding for that, that's going to be more likely. For example, the person running a community hub might need some of their time costed in than somebody who's a local policy officer for whom that's their actual day job anyway. But nevertheless, there's obviously the more people you involve, the more cost implications there might be for that. But in terms of the logic of the grant, there's no particular reason why you couldn't have more than one.
Perfect, thanks. So someone has also asked in terms of how we define low carbon living. They said, are you interested in climate resilience and adaptation projects, or is the focus just on mitigation and carbon reduction?
Good question. The original grant for the original sort of scoping by the ESRC, their framing was sustainable and equitable transitions to low carbon living. So the low carbon living was their phrase, and the framing, which is by definition a sort of first of all, it's a mitigation phrase in climate policy terms. But at the same time, we know that this arena in British life has become rapidly changing by a number of things, the changing political circumstances, some cascading climate impacts, flooding, heat waves, etc. And so attention to adaptation and resilience has become heightened. So I wouldn't exclude those. I think it's and heightened not just because, as this summer's shown, we're in the middle of a heat wave. It's also heightened because of some of the politicization of climate action, with the rise of reform in particular, meaning that people are looking for other terms than things like net zero that might have more purchase in local context. And they might be able to develop a project in a particular location using other narratives than climate action or net zero or low carbon living. So some of it's not only the climate impacts thing that's driving interest in other terms like adaptation or resilience. So I think it's and that in itself is interesting. That change in the conditions of what lots of us are researching in the UK in particular. So yes, totally fine to do that. I think the core question is those goals of the centre. So in some sense, there is a connection back to low carbon living and carbon mitigation, but it doesn't have to be centered on that as a project.
Great. Another question someone has asked, two people have asked actually about secondments. So someone has asked, can the fund be used to fund secondments from an outside organisation to university? So that would be someone working in a research capacity for a period of time, and then also vice versa. So someone, a researcher working in an outside organisation.
That one I'm less certain what the answer is, if I'm honest. Like I said, slightly quipped halfway through that the ESRC makes us do these commissioning funds, but none of us have ever actually run a grant application process before. I mean, the default backstop rule is that we're constrained and enabled by UKRI/ESRC policies. Tempted to ask if Lizzie Hinchliffe is, or somebody from the ESRCs here could answer that. But so if you know what the UKRI rule is, then the chances are that would be something that would apply to this application as well. It feels yeah, I'm not, to be honest, I'm not certain. This is Neil Simcock, I think, has asked this question, so maybe others as well. So I think if you can leave that with us, and we'll go away and get back with something slightly more precise, because that's a bit waffly. But it's good to know. Yeah, I did know I wouldn't be able to answer all of those. Thanks, Neil. And then Adam, also the reverse, please. Yes. Okay.
Yes, we can follow up with those afterwards.
Yeah.
So got a question about the focus of the project. So someone has asked, do you expect community and citizen focused projects only, or can they be business focused as well? For example, small businesses, and I guess SMEs as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Any of those, yeah, so businesses, totally fine. The question to ask is how they fit into one of the themes, whether that's, so the theme of social solidarity economies does, if you like, it is where most, not all, but most of the business focused projects might occur. So they are constrained a little bit in terms of what we're interested in, types of business. But nevertheless, there could be other ones as well. I'm probably constrained by my own imagination in that regard, right? And the social and built infrastructures may well be ones whether a business is doing, whether that's in construction or transport or food sector or whatever, that may be business activity that could be, that would fit within that theme quite well. So yeah, absolutely fine to have businesses as partners.
We've also got some questions around early career researchers. So someone has asked, is there any flexibility around how an ECR is defined? For example, people who've worked slightly over 7 years, but on part-time contracts, so their total professional experience would be less than 7 years.
Yeah, we have had a bit of a conversation, including the OSRC, on about how to operationalize that, because obviously you can write a rule that ends up being way too rigid. The 7-year rules are reasonably standard, common rule of thumb. But what we've done in the form, when you get to it, that bit of it, is we just say, please tell us how you think you meet the category of ECR. And the 7-year rule is, if you like, then the 7-year is a guideline, not a fixed rule. And if some of that was part-time, or some of that was working outside academia, or taking career breaks for parental leave, and etc., there's lots of reasons why that 7-year rule might not be something we would be rigid about. So just fill in that box and explain to us, and we're not looking to arbitrarily exclude people on that regard. It's also worth saying that we've struggled to say, and well, I don't know if there is a way to say it really. We haven't said, let's say 40% of or 50% of applications, awards will go to ECRs, because then of course that makes that sort of cut-off rule even more charged. So we've just left that as a vague aspiration to favour ECRs, rather than a strict rule that we will, operationalise priority for ECRs in some strict way. So in other words, if we sat there and read it and thought we think that's a bit of a stretch, it wouldn't necessarily mean we wouldn't fund the project at all. Because we haven't got any like a quota for ECRs or anything like that in the way that we'll operationalise a portfolio.
Just to follow up on that, Matt, someone has asked, would an ECR include a current PhD student who's expected to submit before the end of this year?
The short answer is I suspect the answer to that is no. We had one question on the email about somebody who hasn't finished a PhD but has got an academic position. I think in general, if you are a current PhD student, you would have to, at the moment you apply, you would have to be, or maybe I don't know if it's when you apply or when you would start the award, you would have to be eligible to receive UKRI funds. And I think if you're a current PhD student, the answer to that is no. So I suspect the answer to that is no, unless the exception would be as if you are a PhD student, but actually you're also a lecturer at a university, as we did get an email question about that. The question then about if you're a current PhD student is obviously then to find somebody who you'd want to work with essentially as a postdoc on that project, which would be, it would be perfect sort of a project to work on as a postdoc with somebody more experienced. But that's obviously then finding somebody who would be willing to do that with you.
Okay, and then just a final question, just before we move on to the breakout room. So thanks everyone for your questions. If yours hasn't been answered, we will follow up with those afterwards. And some of them might, if you joined later, have been captured in the presentation at the beginning of the webinar. But just to end with Matt, someone's asked about projects that kind of don't fall into those 5 themes kind of neatly. So they've given the example of co-design of retrofit and renewables in terrace streets.
Yeah, we don't want to exclude things that aren't in those. And there's lots of other criteria in terms of the quality of the project, and we may just think, oh, that's a superb project, we've got to fund that. I mean, that's not one of the priority themes because we have people in the Just Centre who work on retrofit, 3 or 4 actually people who work on retrofit already. So we didn't highlight that as a particular thing, but it may be that your application is doing it in a really different way to what we're doing, or in an interestingly different geographical setting. Although there's a lot of terrace streets in northern England, but so yeah, we would look at all of those, but it would just be something that we would it wouldn't tick that box, obviously, because it's not in one of those 5 priority areas, but that we wouldn't exclude it as per se for that. I've seen this question also about ESRC eligibility applied. Would being a co-I on another ESRC grant affect eligibility on the scheme? I don't think so. I think you can be a co-I, or ESRC now call it a project co-lead on more than 1 grant at a time. So I don't think that should affect eligibility.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone for your questions. So if you just want to share your screen again, Matt, we'll get into the breakout rooms.
Oh, I do that in the share screen. Okay. So that, yeah, just so that's a few of the links that you go, and the email address just-fund@manchester.ac.uk if you've got other queries. Okay. So yeah, so at the top of in all those buttons at the top, you should see a thing saying rooms, and then Neve in a minute is going to open, or may have already done it, open 5 rooms, 1 for each of the themes. So if you do want to join any of those to find potential collaborators, then now's the moment to do that. Great, I think everybody's back. Neve, let me know if I'm wrong.
Yep, should be.
Okay. Well, hopefully that was a useful exercise for people who wanted to make links with other people working in similar areas. I could see lots of people in each of the rooms, so that's handy. And I hope the general presentation was helpful in thinking about an application. We're looking forward for your applications, and although we're slightly daunted about the number there may be, if I'm honest as well. So there's additional stuff there in terms of links to the page, links to FAQs. We will probably go through the questions and we will answer any that we haven't answered today separately. And if there's any common patterns, we will put additional things onto the FAQs page as well. So it's hopefully stuff's clear for us. But there's always that email address, just-fund@Manchester, to send us any additional questions you have over the course of the summer, and somebody will pick those questions up. But that's it. So thank you for coming, and we look forward to reading lots of interesting applications for the commissioning fund.